Macros in Bee Swarm Simulator have become one of the most prevalent ways to make honey, gather materials, and complete quests, due to the simplicity and accessibility of modern macros. All you need to do is download the macro and click start, then the whole grind aspect of Bee Swarm is fully automated. It is widely accepted by many players and is the main method of progression for anyone wanting to advance in a timely manner. And if you don't macro, you would be easily overtaken by people who do. But how did macros take over Bee Swarm Simulator in the first place? But first, let's go over what macroing actually is, and why it is so significant in Bee Swarm Simulator. The word macro is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as a single instruction that expands automatically into a set of instructions to perform a certain task. In Bee Swarm, macroing is pretty much a complete cycle of instructions which perform tasks which are customized by the player. People use macros to farm in fields with a selection of different patterns and paths, complete bug runs, complete repeatable quests such as Polar Bear or Riley Bee, or just gather materials in general. These macros automate almost everything that you would be normally doing in Bee Swarm, except there is no time or attention required, meaning players can progress through the game even while they're asleep, at school, or simply doing something else. But macroing wasn't always like this, and to find out how it got to this point, we have to go all the way back to 2018. 2018 was the year in which Bee Swarm was released to the public, meaning there were no initial strategies or hive colors, and certainly no macros. However, auto-clicking had always been a thing that players used to AFK grind in these types of games, leading many players to quickly start using them, both while grinding to prevent repetitive clicking and strain, and to AFK grind in fields without being kicked for inactivity. As well as this, early signs of macroing started to appear only a few months after the game's release, with players talking about mouse software macros to prevent inactivity, and some leaderboard players using really fancy macros or bots to play 24/7 and walk to fields and start collecting. At this point in time, Onnit was reportedly really annoyed at players doing this, causing him to deal with them accordingly. Auto-clicking and basic macros of course didn't gather materials and farm efficiently, but it was a solid start for what players would start to create in upcoming updates. As the game and its player base continued to grow, players quickly realized that they could take macroing much further to keep up with the increasing grind each update required. It was around early 2020 when talk of Jitbit macro recorder started in the official Bee Swarm Discord server, but it wasn't until mid-2021 that popular Bee Swarm YouTubers started making tutorials on how to use them. This was likely because Onnit had not fully allowed macros until late 2020, which allowed the community to start actively working on new and improved ones. On the 5th of July 2021, a YouTuber known as Yarix uploaded a video titled How to Macro on Bee Swarm Simulator 500 billion honey per day, in which he demonstrated downloading and installing Jitbit macro recorder, and running pre-made macros made by Gifted TY. The macros which he provided in his description consisted of plain field macros, bug run and wealth clock macros, easements macros, and vicious bee macros. These macros all ran off pre-recorded keyboard and mouse inputs and didn't have much image recognition or move speed correction. Although this was far from perfect, many leaderboard players began using these macros, both to gather materials for their upcoming boosts, or just macro for honey in general. This was the time when Blue Hive started to become more popular, due to the recent addition of the Supreme Star Amulet only a year earlier. Macroing enabled players to keep up their bubble bloat buff while being AFK, allowing them to stay in the fields for longer periods, therefore generating more hourly honey. Although macroing had become very prominent throughout the game, there was one final update that unintentionally buffed macroing significantly. December 26, 2021, Bee Swarm's annual Christmas event was released, and it came with the addition of Dapper Bear, Planters, Nectar, and 2 new bees. Each of these features individually buffed macroing in their own separate ways. One of the new bees added was the Buoyant Bee. The Buoyant Bee offered 3 new abilities and 1 new passive. These included Blue Bomb, Inflate Balloons, and its gifted ability, Surprise Party. Its Inflate Balloon ability, when activated, summoned a balloon on the field, acting as a mini bag, which filled up when pollen was collected beneath it. The capacity of these balloons scaled with the bee's level and the player's capacity. Once a balloon was either filled up or expired, it returned to the player's hive, waiting to be converted. This ability alone significantly buffed Blue's playstyle. Since Blue Hives had already started to maximize their honey at hive percentage before this update, Buoyant Bee greatly multiplied the amount of honey Blue Hives made by macroing. The other major addition this update brought was Nectar. Nectar is a set of buffs granted from different planters placed in different fields, providing unique buffs to the type of nectar. From the 5 different nectar types, 4 of them were extremely important for Blue Hives, providing buffs such as Blue Pollen, Honey at Hive, and Convert Rate. The Convert Rate and Honey at Hive buffs proved to be very synergetic with the Buoyant Bee, due to its inflate balloon ability. And if these nectars were maxed out to 24 hours, it would provide extremely strong buffs, opening the door for players to design a macro that would maintain them constantly. And on June 15, 2022, players did just that. June 15, 2022, Natro macro is published and released to the public. The original macro interface looked similar to what we know today, but a lot more minimal. It included the Gather tab, in which you could gather in selected fields. However, there was a limited amount of patterns, and you couldn't customize things such as sprinkler location or gather with shift lock. What made it significantly better than Jitbit macros was the Planters tab. It allowed players to set nectar priorities so that the macro would plant and harvest planters to maintain those nectar priorities. It looks almost identical to the latest Natro version, which goes to show how good it would have been back then. This alone was a massive step forward for the Bee Swarm community, but what truly pushed Natro ahead of every other macro at the time was its consistency. Unlike Jitbit, Natro didn't rely on fixed mouse and keyboard inputs. It used image-based detection, move speed correction, and live checks to make sure it always knew where your player was, how long you had been gathering for, and when planters needed to be harvested. For the first time, macroing in Bee Swarm was accessible and efficient, and it actually reacted to what was happening in the game. Because of this, Natro macro quickly became the standard macro for almost every Bee Swarm player. It offered reliability and consistency that Jitbit couldn't come close to, and was useful for any hive color at any level of progression. And naturally, as more players started to use Natro, the community shifted with it. Boosting numbers increased, hive metas changed, and early game progression started to become shorter. Natro macro stayed as the community's #1 pick for a macro all the way up until today, due to constant updates and reliability. However, with the recent advancement and accessibility of AI, players were bound to utilize it to make a macro. On the 2nd of August 2024, a Discord server for a new macro named Revolution Macro was created. However, it was until the 8th of March 2025 that the development of the macro started, allowing access to beta testers in the Discord. Another 4 months went by until a GitHub page was created, and another 3 months later, on the 21st of September, a YouTuber named Banana uploaded a video regarding the macro. The main difference that this macro offered in comparison to Natro macro was its AI field gathering. It worked by identifying tokens in the field and collecting them based on a token priority set by the player. Another hidden but key feature offered by this macro was its vicious hop feature. It was much more efficient than Natro macros and allowed players to link alt accounts to also search for vicious bees. This specific feature was long awaited by the community and was only used prior by leaderboard players. Although this macro is still fairly new, the developers are actively improving it and pushing out new updates, and with enough time, it could definitely overtake Natro macro. Revolution macro really made players start to realize how much further macroing can be advanced, and also how important they are to the game. And with both Natro and Revolution continuing to grow, it's clear that macroing is no longer a side strategy or a niche tool. It has become a core part of how the game is played today, and if they were never created, the game would be in a completely different place. If you made it this far, you obviously enjoyed the video, and you should consider subscribing. You should also join my Discord server, which is linked in the description.